Donald Trump has suggested that the November presidential election be postponed, saying the increase in postal voting could lead to fraud and inaccurate results. He suspended a time limit until people could vote properly, safely, and securely. There is little evidence to support Mr. Trump's claims, but he has long spoken out against postal voting, which he says is susceptible to fraud. U.S. states want to facilitate postal voting due to public health concerns related to the coronavirus pandemic. Under the U.S. Constitution, Mr. Trump does not have the power to postpone the election himself. Any delay must be approved by Congress. The President has no direct power over both houses of Congress. In a series of tweets, Mr. Trump said that universal postal voting would make the November vote the most inaccurate and fraudulent election in history and a great embarrassment to the United States. He suggested, without providing any evidence, that postal voting, as it is known in the United States, would be susceptible to foreign interference. Democrats talk about foreign influence in the vote, but they know that postal voting is an easy way for foreign countries to enter the race, he said. Subscribe to the channel and like. You will have fresh news on everything. Mr. Trump also said postal voting is already proving to be a catastrophic disaster in areas where it is being tested. Does postal voting in the United States lead to huge fraud? Could Donald Trump delay the presidential election? In June, New York City allowed voters to vote by mail in the Democratic primary ballot for the party's presidential candidate. But there have been long delays in counting the ballots and the results are still unknown. U.S. media are also reporting that many ballots will not be counted because they were not filled out correctly or do not have a postmark indicating they were sent out before the official end of the vote. However, several other states have a long history of postal voting. Analysis by Anthony Zurcher, reporter at North America. Donald Trump cannot delay the November presidential election without Congress, partially controlled by Democrats, first approving the decision. If he didn't already know, someone has certainly told him. The president should also know that tweeting about a delay, even presented as a "I'm just asking" question, is sure to start a political storm, especially after repeatedly refusing to say whether he would accept an unfavorable outcome in the next presidential election. Mr. Trump appears to be doing everything in his power to undermine the credibility of the November vote, in which a record number of Americans are expected to rely on postal voting to avoid the risk of exposure to the coronavirus. He has repeatedly made false and misleading statements about the reliability of postal voting and suggested broad conspiracy theories. Critics warn he could lay the groundwork for challenging the results, although the goal may simply be to give him a scapegoat if he loses. His tweet could also be an attempt to deflect attention from the really dismal second quarter economic numbers that just came out. He is counting on a financial turnaround to bring his re-election campaign to life, and on the contrary, the outlook looks extremely bleak. Whatever the reason, tweeting about a postponement of the election is not the decision of a candidate confident in victory, and could be a sign of more desperate measures to come. Asked by reporters on whether a president could delay the election, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said he would not enter a judgment on the fly. When pressed, he said the Justice Department would make this legal decision, adding, "We want an election that everyone trusts." Ellen Weintraub, chairman of the U.S. Federal Election Commission, said Mr. Trump did not have the power to move the election, and added, "He shouldn't be moved either." She called for more funding so that states can hold the safe and secure elections that all Americans want. Many Republicans, including Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, also rejected the idea. "Never in the history of federal elections have we ever held an election, and we should move forward with our elections," said Mr. McCarthy. Trump ally Senator Lindsey Graham said a delay was not a good idea. Democrats have also lined up to condemn Mr. Trump's suggestion. New Mexico Senator Tom Udall said there was no way the president could delay the election. But the fact that he even suggests that this is a serious and frightening attack on the democratic process. All members of Congress, and the administration, should speak out, he said. However, Chris Stewart, a Republican congressman from Utah, said that if he did not support the postponement of the election, Mr. Trump had a legitimate argument that postal voting was difficult to monitor. Can you guarantee the accuracy of the postal ballot? Now in some states you can. In my state of Utah, for example, we've been doing this for a while, but we're a small state with it's harder to do nationally, he told the BBC. President Trump does not have the authority to move the date of the election, which usually takes place on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. Any date change will need to be approved by both chambers of Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate. Democrats control the House of Representatives and some have already said they will not support any postponement of the vote. Any decision by Congress to delay elections to 2021 would also require a constitutional amendment, constitutional experts quoted by U.S. media have said. The amendment would be needed to change the swearing-in dates for members of Congress and the new presidential administration, according to NPR. Finally, legal experts cited by NBC have said that even if Congress agrees to delay the election, Mr. Trump's term as president will still expire on January 20, 2021 under the 20th Constitutional Amendment. Which states organize postal votes? Earlier this month, 6 U.S. states were planning to hold an all-mail election in November: California, Utah, Hawaii, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington. Other states are considering the possibility, according to a postal voting campaign group. These states will automatically send out postal ballots to all registered voters, which will then need to be returned or cast on election day, although some in-person votes are still available in certain limited circumstances. About half of U.S. states allow any registered voter to vote by mail upon request. Critics of postal voting argue that people could vote more than once per absent ballot and in person. Mr. Trump has in the past said there is a risk that thousands upon thousands of people sitting in someone's living room signing ballots everywhere. However, there is no evidence of widespread fraud, according to numerous national and state studies over the years.